Outside of maybe Mary, the Mother of God, there is no saint more revered or written about than St. Francis of Assisi. From devotional books to inspirational quotes that circulate on social media, the words of St. Francis can be found all around us. But as I learned in the 2nd grade when I read that the moon was made out of blue cheese, you can't believe everything you see online. Sadly, some of the quotes we often see of St. Francis came long after his death. So which quotes did St. Francis actually say, and what do we make of the ones he didn't? This is Catholicism in Focus. While there's always been an understandable level of exaggeration and embellishment in the history of the saints, the rise of the internet has sped up this process, producing innumerable quotes of St. Francis that have no source or foundation in his actual life. And this is not necessarily a bad thing. While not authentic to St. Francis in the strictest sense, many things attributed to him bear a strong resemblance to the things he actually said, and serve to show the continued reverence he has in the minds and hearts of modern believers. One example of this is the Peace Prayer, commonly known as the Prayer of St. Francis. Did St. Francis actually compose these words? No. History tells us that the prayer first appeared in a French spiritual magazine in 1912 and became popular during World Wars I and II. Biographer Augustine Thompson points out that the wording itself also gives it away. Noble as its sentiments are, Francis would not have written such a piece, focused as it is on the self, with its constant repetition of the pronouns I and me, the words God and Jesus never appearing once. Does this make it a bad prayer then? Absolutely not. While it was not penned by Francis himself, its desire to live in peace, to go to the outcasts, and to be lesser than others in society captures the spirit in which he lived. The same can be said about the classic Franciscan line, preach the gospel at all times, when necessary use words. Nowhere in the writings of St. Francis or his earliest biographers can we find this line. In fact, no one truly knows where it came from. And yet, it sounds like something he would say, because it's pretty similar to some of his other quotes. His official rule begins, the rule in life of the friars minor is this, namely, to observe the holy gospel of our Lord Jesus Christ. And the earlier rule exhorts, let all the brothers preach by their deeds. Taken together, this famous quote fits nicely within the Franciscan tradition, even if St. Francis wasn't the first to say it. Of course, not everything attributed to St. Francis is quite as redeemable. Some things just make us Franciscans cringe a bit. There are poetic lines like, a single sunbeam is enough to drive away many shadows. Motivational sayings like, start by doing what is necessary, then do what's possible, and suddenly, you're doing the impossible. And my personal favorite, he who works with his hands is a laborer. He who works with his hands and his head is a craftsman. He who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist. Besides the obvious feeling one gets that each were written in the 1970s or later and clearly not from the mouth of Francis, even the message seems a bit off. Francis was a very practical person that didn't write in poetic terms. He mostly quoted the Bible. There was no concept in his world of doing the impossible or achieving great feats. He saw himself as a great sinner whose only purpose was to humbly serve God. And really, Francis wanted nothing more for his brothers to work with their hands, only allowing them to study after receiving special permission. The idea of favoring any other work goes against everything we know about him. For this reason, it's obvious to see for the Franciscan-minded that not everything attributed to St. Francis was said by St. Francis or even Franciscan in inspiration. Some things have absolutely no connection, and it challenges us to think critically, question sources, and not to accept everything we're given. But that doesn't mean we should throw everything away that didn't come from the 13th century. Just because something may not be authentic does not mean that it doesn't capture the truth about the saint and serve as a powerful reminder of his continued significance in our world. While many quotes may not have come directly from his mouth, when they arise from the minds and hearts of those who continue to live with his spirit today, the spirit that inspired St. Francis so many years ago remains alive and continues to speak to us today. Thanks for watching this episode of Catholicism in Focus, brought to you by you. That's right, this channel is sponsored by generous people through Patreon and PayPal. And this week I want to especially thank Tom and Elizabeth Sullivan for their monthly donation. Of course, money is but a small part of this mission of evangelization and catechesis, so thank you as well to all who offer prayers and continue to share this video on social media.